every interaction we have is a positive one. They're
But what
really
does that mean? Like you would just say, "Hey, you're awesome," or what does it mean? She's
so
awesome.
it can be a variety of things. It can be associated because they know that we're providing those, enrichment items and things like that. Also, food. So many people don't realize that almost all of the animals at the zoo, I think that surprises people with the enrichment part of things, but also the training is that we will use high value reinforcers, the food items in particular that they really, really enjoy, and then usually might need to be fed in a smaller quantity. So you could think about it as, dessert, right? You don't want to eat just dessert for a meal, but you can use that to train animals to participate in their own care. So just by the very nature of that, it creates a positive association between the keepers who are working with those animals and the animals themselves, because they see us and be like, oh boy, here comes another keeper. Usually they have some treats for me, right? Because they're not viewing us as intruders into their territory, and they're so comfortable in their enclosures. So I like to view them as, their house. And I even look at my own life, right? And even though I drive a significant way to work, it's not all that dissimilar from, we'll keep talking about the tiger, about they have, their own house, their own living room that they live in. And then as they take those trail systems out, throughout the grounds, it's, very similar to me driving in my car. I'm not stopping, right, and exploring fields. I'm just seeing this view. And then when I go to work, I'm, in a very condensed footprint, but I see all of these sights and sounds. So relating that back to, just being their house and being comfortable, I think, I wouldn't want to anthropomorphize it, but the closest concept I could use to illustrate is, when I obviously it wouldn't be in my house, but when I come back from work and there's some Amazon packages, right, or the lawn mowing service has come, I know that somebody's been here and I'm happy to see it. So they also, tigers in particular can smell. So there's probably, likely that they're smelling their habitat and they're, they know that it was the keeper that they're familiar with that was in there. And then also just through learning, right, they know that when they come back in, they can't wait to see what, how it's changed, right? That exploration. So they have a generalized confidence, I would like to say, towards most things that happen in their environment in the zoo, because it's so positive. And that creates it inoculates them against fear in some aspects, because even things that we vaccines, things like that, those are all voluntary with those big cats. So they all line up and allow the keepers and the vets to inject them. So you can imagine that when there's almost no concept of fear for them, there's almost nothing that ever happens that's negative or aversive, then that creates this generalized uber confidence towards everything in their life.
Such a great point. Isn't that true for so many things in life, in every relationship in life, that you have positive affirmations, and then it just creates a general level of trust that
there's some inherent stress in that. So I think that there's enough, unavoidable things in life, whether or not you are at a zoo where everything is controlled, or you're in the wild where, everything is random and relatively unpredictable. I think that's the other thing that we do is, through that enrichment, we try to not necessarily increase stress. We try to reduce stress, but when there's new and novel items, I think that speaks a little bit to adding some excitement there to it. But yeah, by and large, I mean, I think, and there is some discussion too about exposure to stressful things, is that a good thing for animals? And I think that, I would guess, not having, the heavy science background to weigh in as an authority here. But I would say that in the wild, because there's an even broader level of choice and control, we can provide as much choice and control as possible, but we're always limited by the fact that the animals in the captivity, right, and that we're providing everything for them, no matter how challenging we try to make it for them, no matter how much we try to bring out the utilization of their senses and adaptations to earn a living. There is, you know, a different level of choice and control in the wild. And with that, I think also comes, you know, highly stressful things, but it also opens up multiple other options where animals can deal with those high level stressors. So if you think about it as a balance, you know, in the wild, that tiger would have very, very high level stress, but they'd also have very, very, you know, huge options to explore their habitat, to run away, to climb up a new tree, to, you know, swim over across a moat. There's a lot more things inherent in, you know, the world, right, than a condensed footprint in a zoo. So, you know, my guess is that those stressors that are unavoidable in a zoo habitat, we try to keep them, you know, in balance, because even though we try to provide the utmost choice and control, you know, the scale is smaller. I hope that makes sense. You know, I would say from a natural history perspective that, you know, especially when you're talking about rare animals or animals that are solitary and cover wide swaths of area, and because there's a high mortality rate, right? They don't have veterinarians in the wild. You know, if an injury can be catastrophic and kill them. So I think if they find a healthy, you know, opposite sex, you know, member of the same species, that they're inclined to really breed and take that opportunity, because, you know, nature wants them to replicate, wants them to pass their genes and survive. So I think, you know, natural selection as a concept, and you know, weeding out the gene pool of weak individuals, I think they pretty much let nature be the guide that, oh, here's another tiger that seems healthy and is alive, so this is a good breeding prospect.
What a beautiful answer. Yeah. What a beautiful answer. So there's like a Tinder for tigers that curators run.
Yeah. It's I would say it's more of an arranged marriage, you know, but it's one that they're not forced by any means, and you know, use their natural behavior and instincts and to follow suit. But I would just say that I'm, you know, better educated and more aware of it than your average person, because I'm working in zoos and, you know, studying this, right? Is that a lot of these animals don't have the habitat left to support them. So when you read numbers about there might be, you know, 1,200 Siberian tigers left in the wild or something similar like that, I think it's not because, you know, my understanding is it's not because there's, you know, problems with them reproducing. It's because there's lack of habitat and resources, or there's external pressure from humans that, you know, that's the limit to is how many can support that. So then when you think about, well, even if the habitat in the wild could support more, could you reintroduce one that was, you know, born and raised in captivity? So you know, many species, their parents teach them how to hunt, you know, they support them during that period. They have to be socialized, well socialized, so that they can, you know, go on to breed in the wild, right? And don't just live a solitary life. They have to be wary of humans. If you took some of these animals that just because, no matter how good you try to take yourself or do it and take yourself out of the situation where they don't create any bond with humans, you know, just the fact that they are, you know, at some point in their lives in a zoo environment and surrounded by, you know, human habitation and, you know, all of the trappings of captivity, it would be really difficult to instill a healthy fear that they would need, so that they wouldn't encroach on, you know, just walk right through a village. And then we obviously know what would happen likely to a cat that did that. So I think it's not, it's not practical. And it's also, you know, inherent in the fact that so much of natural habitat is gone that it would serve no real purpose. Even when though we have animals, you know, in the zoo that have positive associations with us, and it's also requires a level of sensitivity that many people might not think about. So they're much less robust and tolerant of things like that, like moving erratically. In general, I would say that wild animals, non-domesticated animals, than, you know, like my house cat that will let my kids just pick it up, or a dog that, you know, you can wrestle with. So there are instances of animals that will, allow us to kind of play with them in zoo environments. But by and large, we are very, very careful. We're reading body language. When we're introducing a new enrichment item, a novel item, we're doing it carefully and calculated in a calculated fashion so that we're not scaring them. They're not avoiding that area of their house, right? Because there's this, new novel object. So that sensitivity, I think, has parallels, not only because that wild pigeon would never fly to my hand if I was moving my hand and acting erratically. And, moreover, even things that are relatively tame will go back to the tiger. The keepers that work with that animal are very conscious of their body language. They're inviting that animal, even though it's protected contact, into their space. They're being very gentle when they're positioning the tail. That's where they get blood from for voluntary blood draws. And they're very slow and thoughtful with their movements, even when they're handing food. So if we were to be insensitive to that, you might actually, there's only fight or flight, right? So anything that is salient to that level, you'll either trigger an avoidance response or you'll trigger an aggressive response. So, it's always important with all of these interactions that we have that we're sensitive to body language. Colors, I think, as a guide, we're always developing exhibits for the animals first, and then trying to meld whatever, the animal needs for welfare into the visitor aesthetic, right? So welfare first, and then we try to make it the least ugly we possibly can so that it's palatable, for our human experience, for our eyes. The nice thing, I think, is that, we, even for indoor enclosures for some of these animals, orangutans, right? When it gets cold, they can't have access. So they're indoors where it's heated. And there we have naturalistic murals. We do have bright colors in for them. But that would be something that, I think it would be at an individual level too. So there's so much variability. So you can look at it as, species inherent tendencies. You could do it at a broad level like that. You could study animals in the wild, but then you'd have to study animals in zoo environments, right? And see if there's any differences. I think that your average person would be surprised at how much thought is put into the diet presentation for these animals. It's very dissimilar to going home and, opening up a can of cat food and feeding your cat, or putting dog kibble in a bowl, or even a farmer feeding livestock. We try to replicate how these animals would eat and roughly the amount of, time and effort it would take to eat. So there's that photo of the jaguar chomping on a watermelon. He's not ingesting that watermelon, but what it's doing is it's just giving them, the opportunity to flex that time budget to chew on what would be an analog to a carcass, if it consumed the rest of its diet too quickly. There is, we can use puzzle feeders, or we can use even paper bags, tied up with rope, and put them all throughout the orangutan enclosure or the yard, and get them to climb up. Yeah, this is a video of one of the lionesses climbing up. So this is over fairly quickly, but at least this gives this animal some novelty, some exercise. And this is early on in the training process here, where, you can even see the muscles flex as she climbs up there. It takes a lot of effort. It takes, it's wear and tear on those claws going up, and little things like that are designed in every aspect of their day to get them to move, to get them to use their senses and adaptations, that nature gives them. This is a generic toy. It just creates some challenge rather than throw that, meat out because this animal's not hunting the snow leopard. Instead, making it a little bit more challenging for it to figure out how to knock that over. And you can see it kind of replicates some chasing and pouncing. And, this is a very easy opportunity to feed, but we can get very complicated with these things. Yeah. And then for the foragers, for things like our bears, our sloth bears that we have that might eat thousands of termites, in a day, we can scatter feed things. We can feed things in tubes so they can use their long tongue to excavate insects or, whatever their base diet is. So we put a ton of thought into, again, allowing them to have some sort of control over their environment by actually having to forage for their food or using their senses and adaptations, because diet, it's a primary reinforcer, right? An animal doesn't have to learn to like it. Everything needs to eat. It's the high point of many animals' day, including ours. So if you can make that as engaging as possible, it gives them a sense of fulfillment, not to get too anthropological on that, but a sense of accomplishment, a sense of using their adaptations, and not just having their food put out on a platter for them to passively eat. And it can occupy a significant amount of time and facilitate exercise.